We are live. Hi, everyone. It's time for another amazing episode of CCS Alumni Live, which is a weekly conversation where I, Brandy Keeler, Assistant Director of Admissions at College for Creative Studies, interview amazing graduates from our school about their journey to career from high school. To go from high school all the way to career. And today we have an awesome transportation design alum that we are going to talk to. So I'm going to read their bio, introduce them, and then add our guest to the live for today's conversation. So today we are speaking with David Mucci, who is an industrial designer and custom motorcycle builder. Since his 17th birthday, David's been tinkering with his own vehicles. The obsession led him to studying product and transportation design at CCS, where he then graduated in 2008 with his transportation design degree. And out of school, he's worked for a couple of consultancies in Chicago. But in 2014, Dave made the leap to start his own business revolving around his passion for motorcycles. He set up a studio called Moto-Mucci to build one-off custom motorcycles and do design consulting for the motorcycle industry. This led him to a senior designer position at Zero Motorcycles in California, where he's currently working. And through a special collaboration with training sketchbook suppliers IDRAW Creative Goods, David has also developed a unique book designed to help people like him and others, those aspiring transportation and motorcycle designers of the world, accurately sketch their own custom two-wheeled concepts. So without further ado, I am going to add Mr. David Mucci to our live for today. Hello, how are you?
Hey, what's up, Brittany?
Talking to awesome alumni. That's what's up. So I know we don't have a ton of guests now, but I know people may drop in later, and then this is being recorded, so hundreds of folks will watch it if they don't tune in live. But I'm excited to get our conversation started today.
Cool.
So tell me what's currently up in your world. I know you recently got the new job. What is your position now?
Senior designer at Zero Motorcycles. But yeah, like you said, I've only been here 4 months now. So I'm still in the transition process. The first few months were remote when I was still in Portland. But now I'm basically in between. I'm staying at a friend's place in Santa Cruz while we look for houses and shop space and all that. And so I'm kind of in a weird limbo state right now.
Yeah, that's a big move to make in the middle of I'm actually going to turn my little fan down because I think it's kind of loud here. But that's a big move to make in the middle of a pandemic, new job and looking for a new place to live, a new state.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's meeting all of your colleagues over video calls is not easy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel lucky to have gotten the position. I mean, it's a ton of fun. I get to design motorcycles at work and live in Santa Cruz, so I can't complain.
So are you working on any exciting projects that you can talk about right now? I know people typically in transportation industry are like, I can't talk about what I'm working on. But,
No, not really. I mean, I can say that the stuff I'm working on right now probably won't see, the bigger stuff probably won't be out for another 4 years or so. It's just kind of the life cycle of transportation things. So little projects here and there for, upcoming models, just newer updated parts and stuff like that. But no, unfortunately, it's all pretty secret. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always ask just in case there's something you can't talk about. No, that totally makes sense. So tell me this. I know Moto-Mucci started with a blog as well. So are you, even though you're working for an employer, are you still doing blog content? Are you still doing custom motorcycles yourself?
Man, I haven't kept up with the blog at all in the past at least few years. I mean, I started that back in 2010-ish. And it was really just a way for me to, so I bought a bike and wanted to create a design project around that bike.
Mm-hmm.
and customize it at the same time. So the blog was just me throwing stuff, like all the inspiration imagery, whatever. I just made a design project out of it and threw it all up on the blog, and um, that got a lot of people interested,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people reached out about getting bikes built or design work done or something from that. So just putting the work out there, I ended
Mm-hmm.
up making a lot of contacts in the industry, and started doing more of that in my spare time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and eventually down the line, creating a business out of it. But right now, it is still officially a business, and I do plan on still building bikes because it's just something I'll always do, whether
Yeah.
it's a business or not a business, Um, so right now it'll just be after hours stuff. But I don't have anything right now that I'm working on because I
Mm-hmm.
wrapped up the bikes that I had to build for clients. And then once those were done, I just cut it off. So it was like, all right, I got to concentrate on moving and starting this new job and all that. So I did find a shop space in Santa Cruz. So eventually all that stuff will come down with me and it'll kick back up again, but maybe not for a couple months.
Got you. Now tell me this, because I know there are designers who design but don't fabricate, they don't build. Like, what caused you or sparked that interest for you to do like the actual building of these objects in addition to designing them?
Yeah. How far back do you want to go? I mean, it's
As far as you're
like,
willing to take me.
yeah, I mean, like way back, my on my dad's side, we had like machinists and mechanics, and on my mom's
Mm,
side was arts and crafts, clay, graphic design. So that's probably where those two things started, of course.
got you.
But yeah, I mean, at school, I loved that we were designing projects and then going and making prototypes of them.
Hmm.
You're in the wood shop or you're in the rapid prototyping shop and you're carving stuff and painting it. And
Hmm.
I liked the hands-on aspect of that. And then I got a job at a consultancy out of school in Chicago called Teams Design, and realized that most of the hands-on stuff was outsourced to rapid prototyping facilities and things like that. So we were still doing, ergonomic prototypes and things like that, but it was much more rough and sketch based
Hmm.
than, fine tuning and, painting and doing the little details. So I think that's where the motorcycle stuff started, where I wanted to do both things on one project, get to design
Hmm.
it on the computer and sketch it out and then actually go build it. So I just started my design background was, up here. My fabrication skills were like way, way low. So I just started sketching stuff, and then I'd be like, all right, now how do I make that? And I'd have to
Hmm.
research, all right, if it's going to be made out of carbon fiber, if it's going to be made out of steel, how do I weld? How do I lay carbon fiber? And it's just
Hmm.
like for every little project, I would just spend hours on YouTube or reaching out to people that were in the industry and just learning all these new skills so that I could go make the thing that I designed, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's intense. Do you think if you were to, and I know our industrial design majors are intense at CCS, like product design, transportation design, they're intense. But do you think if you were to go back in time, would you have minored in something like crafts or like got in more of the metalsmithing classes?
So, yes. However, I did not spend enough time on them when I was in school because
Mm,
I was so like blind or focused on my major, on ID, that all of these classes that I took that were amazing and I could have learned a ton at, I ended up not spending as much time as I wish I should have. Um,
mm,
like I took a welding class. I did terrible because I wasn't paying attention. I was probably sitting there sketching whatever, major project I had at the time.
gotcha.
And then I got out of school and I was like, man, I really wish I learned a lot more in those classes. I had friends that were doing, we were all in friends that were in ID, but they were doing, bent wood furniture making or Damascus
Mm,
knife making, like really cool stuff. They were in the foundry or in the wood shop. And I
mm,
liked being in there and doing that, but I think I felt, I mean, anybody that goes to art school knows that like there's no end to the project. You can spend as
yeah.
much time on it as they'll give you. So like I was prioritizing ID work over that other stuff. And looking back on it, I wish I scheduled my time a little bit better so that I was like hard cutoff on ID. Now let's go learn something else. Because that's
Gotcha.
basically what I've been forcing myself to do over the past 10
Yeah.
years after graduating, is learning all those things that I should have paid attention in the first place.
Well, it still worked out for you because I've seen some of the motorcycles you worked on. It's like my brain is like, how? Like, how? Um, yeah, it's an amazing skill set to be able to take what you have in your mind, make a sketch or rendering of that idea, and then to like physically create an object that works. That's like, I don't understand how. I just, my brain is
Yeah,
like, hats off to you.
it's super gratifying to go
Hmm.
from a napkin sketch to like a motorcycle that I could ride.
Hmm.
So
Do
it's,
you ride all the motorcycles that you actually build? You
oh
test them
yeah,
for your clients?
yes, yeah. I'll have a crazy anxiety attack if I just let something go out the door without like rigorously testing it to make sure,
Mm.
something that I built isn't going to hurt somebody. So yeah, I do a lot of research into like chassis development for motorcycle platforms and things like that to make sure I'm not doing something that's purely aesthetic. At the end of the day, somebody's going to ride it and it's got to be safe. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a good point. Okay, I have a question about this. I know there's the concept of like form and function in design. Like, what percentage of each would you say goes into the work that you do? Like, what percentage is aesthetic and design and look, and then what percentage is like, okay, I really got to think about the functionality of this thing.
Yeah, with motorcycles, there's no hiding it, right? Like everything's out in the open. Whereas, a car, you've got a shell that's hiding all of the
Hmm.
engineering, all of the, platform and powertrain and engine and all that stuff. So with a bike, it's all out in the open. So I think a lot of it is, I don't like hiding that stuff. I think the mechanical aspects are cool. So if you can
Hmm.
design the functionality or the functional parts in a way
Hmm.
that makes them look, um, interesting to somebody that's viewing the bike, I mean, all the better. I think they are just melded one to one, really. Like a good design does both. It doesn't
Hmm.
hide one or the other, or yeah, it's not compromised either way.
Good to know. Pay
Yeah,
attention, all you aspirational transportation designers out there. You got
yeah.
to
I
think
will
about
say
how it
if
works and how it looks, both.
yeah,
Yeah.
if all right. So if you're a transportation designer and you want to get into motorcycles and know how they work, because the first glaring thing that anybody that knows how a motorcycle functions will see in your sketch is that it doesn't have suspension, or the front wheel won't turn because of the way you sketch something. It happens all the time because you get people that are more focused on automotive design,
Hmm.
and they think, oh, I'm going to sketch a motorcycle, and you're only sketching the beautiful A surfaces, but you're not putting any time into the actual way that it functions. And
Hmm.
it'll elevate your concepts if you know how all that stuff works.
Now, speaking of that, I know you read this really quickly in your bio, but you are working, I don't know if it's complete or you're still working on the IDRAW Motos project. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, it is complete, and actually, I just sold out of all of my books. But
Oh, wow, congrats.
yeah, well, yeah. So it's not technically my company. iDraw is its own company,
Hmm.
but if anybody's familiar with their work previously, they've done 4 or 5 books on shoes, comics, all kinds of stuff. So typically, they'll get somebody in the industry like myself to author the book and create the content. So that's what I did,
Hmm.
and it's all based around the intro to how to design motorcycles. So it touches on all of the functionality, and then goes into proportions and how to set up different models for different use cases, things like that. But yeah, over at iDraw.co, they still have some, I don't know how
Some
many
books
left.
left.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
seems like it's a hot ticket item if you sell out all your copies.
Yeah, I mean, he does, Matt, actually, who runs that's a CCS alum also. That's how I met him.
Ooh, ooh.
Yeah, and he launches all of them through Kickstarter. So a lot of the initial sales are through Kickstarter, and those all go out to people that purchase them, and then we order a specific amount extra to sell on the side, kind of thing. So
That's awesome. Congrats on
yeah,
that
I don't know if
project.
they might be in the store. I know he tries.
CCS bookstore.
I think so. I think he usually
I know he
gets them
carries
in the
the
store.
other ones. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there might be some in the store. I don't know.
Well, if you're interested in learning how to draw motorcycles or comic books or other amazing things, make
Mm.
sure to check out the iDraw.co, another
Yeah,
awesome CCS alum, and the CCS bookstore. All right, shameless plugs. We gotta do them.
yeah.
All right, so at this point, I think we've learned quite a bit about what you're currently doing and some of the amazing things that you're doing in your career. I'd love to. I know you talked a little bit about your family lineage with creativity, but I'd love to talk a little bit more about who you were as a high school artist. We're going to jump in my imaginary time machine with great
Uh-huh.
form and function and go back to high school, David, and tell me, like, what was your goal as a high school artist? What did you think you wanted to do when you grew up?
Yeah, so my mom was an art teacher, an elementary school art teacher. So I grew up with art projects throughout the years. My mom was always putting stuff together for us on the weekend to do little projects here and there. So I came from, in that aspect, I kind of came from a fine arts background because she
Mm-hmm.
was mainly fine arts. She liked drawing and painting and things like that. She graduated in graphic, but then before she became a teacher, she had her own art studio for kids. So a
Mm.
lot of that stuff, just like hand sketching, charcoal, watercolors, and things like that. I was doing around the high school age, but I was always I was into drawing like sports athletes. I was really into drawing logos, which you think like being able to mimic a logo or draw it without looking at it. I loved figuring all that out, the little details of like line weight and the way like proportions and all that. So I guess you could say that's kind of where design started for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was always more geared towards like the industrial and the building and the
Mm-hmm.
problem solving side of art. So I didn't know ID existed until I think I was a sophomore in high school, and there was a poster on the
Mm-hmm.
wall of somebody. I don't even remember what the school was or whatever, but it was somebody carving a car out of clay, and I was like, oh, cars are designed by people, so like I could do that. I
Mm-hmm.
can. So I started like, all right, what major is that? Who does automotive design? And
Mm-hmm.
of course, CCS came up, and that's how they got on my list that I wanted to apply for and toured, and I got really lucky. I went for a tour, and it was just after, I think it was just after one of like the senior shows or something like that. So it was just like
Oh, you
car
saw every.
models everywhere, like
Yeah.
hot sketches all over the walls, and I was like, oh, this is where I want to be. This is killer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's always like for me, a kid in a candy shop feeling looking at the senior shelf, just like, oh my God, there's so much art that you can make.
Oh man, and like going in there at whatever 17 years old, something like that, 18, and I did not. I was like, there's no way I'll be able to do that in 4 years. Like, And and then you find out that you just work around the clock for 4 straight years, and then you eventually figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So tell me this, did you consider other schools when you were applying for transportation design?
Yeah, it was actually pretty hard. So I went to public high school. I didn't have a lot of uh, network or I didn't really have anybody that knew what ID was that was
Mm-hmm.
there to guide me. So like our guidance counselor, when I told them I wanted to design cars, they said engineering. And I was like, I don't think that's it. Um, and it was a lot of research back then. I mean, it was tough. I think I mean, obviously I had the internet, but you didn't have like, hashtags or social apps and things like that where it was much easier to have that stuff put in front of you or to seek it out
Mm-hmm.
with quick searching. So
Mm-hmm.
I toured a lot of schools that had quote unquote industrial design, and some had industrial design but didn't have automotive, or had transportation but it was boats, not cars, things like that. And it was there was not really a way to figure that there wasn't really a way to figure that out until you went and toured, like how
Yeah.
back then at least how to pit them against each other. And then
Mm-hmm.
so like I said, I mean, I came to CCS and I like blew all the other schools out of the water with all the stuff on the walls and all these like crazy models and everything. but yeah, I toured some state schools. I toured some other art colleges like RISD and Savannah, and um, their programs just weren't geared as much towards automotive as I wanted or as I was interested in. So yeah, and then I got to CCS and was like so happy that I got that. I was like, oh right, the automotive industry is here. Of course, this is like where to go. Like I don't know, I was 17. I had no idea. I just found out that cars were designed by people. So like, I didn't know what I was. It was tough. It was, and
Yeah.
I got kind of like, I did a lot of research, but I also got kind of lucky. I know at least a few people I went to school with that got steered in the wrong direction, that went and did, an engineering program or something like that for 2 or 3 years before they realized that it wasn't actually what they wanted to do. So
Yeah.
stuff like this, interviews with alumni, and all this stuff out on social apps now and all that, it's killer. Please cherish it. It's great that you are able to find the information so much easier now.
Yeah, that's great. Great insight. And that's exactly why I do this, because I know myself and many folks were like, wait, this exists, this is possible. Wait, what are the possibilities? And
Yeah.
so it's wonderful to hear your story. So I want to ask you a few more questions about your journey, but I know we have folks who are tuning in live here. So I just want to make sure you all who are watching know that if you have questions for David about motorcycle design, about transportation design, about industrial design, about CCS, anything, make sure to drop your questions in the question box or in the chat box here on Instagram so we can get your questions answered live. So I'm going to ask a couple more questions and then we're going to turn it over to you all and get your questions answered. So tell me this. During your time at CCS, obviously studying transportation design, you learned to design a lot of different types of vehicles, not just, cars or motorcycles, but what were some of the career opportunities that you had as a student? Did you do any internships or sponsored studio projects?
So I started out in transportation for my
Mm-hmm.
first year and a half, maybe something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And then I ended up switching over to industrial design
Mm-hmm.
for pretty much the remainder of my time at CCS. But confusingly, part of the industrial design or the product design focus at that point included a motorcycle design course my senior year. So it was kind of a blend of the two while I was there. Um, the motorcycle class wasn't sponsored, but it was uh, put up by a teacher, Tom Roney. I don't know if he's still there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
if he's still doing the motorcycle design class, take it, because he's amazing and a huge inspiration, and probably the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing now, because he is very influential when it comes to motorcycles. So yeah, that kind of sparked me in that motorcycle direction, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the problem solving aspect of product design too. So I was really into that, and ended up going to, that's kind of why I went into consultancy work out of school, because I just liked the constant changing of projects and problems to solve.
Mm-hmm. So tell me this, if a student were interested in a path like yours, specifically if they had a passion for motorcycles, would you tell them to study product design, industrial design, or would you tell them to study transportation design? Because I know, for example, in our marketing materials, we have bikes that are under the product design umbrella, but I'm like, okay, but what denotes whether something's a vehicle or not?
All of the above. Like, there isn't, it's tough. I'd say going back to what I said before about how I took all these extracurricular classes and felt like I didn't pay enough attention in them. I use, of course, my background in motorcycles and automotive is the majority of what I use on a day-to-day basis. But what I feel makes me a better designer are all those other avenues of information and learning, whether it's going and taking a motorcycle repair course or something just to figure
Mm-hmm.
out how stuff works or functions, or reading, engineering books on the dynamics behind how they work, and really trying to be as well-rounded as possible helps a lot in the motorcycle industry, because there's so much more to consider and design around, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to just an exterior or just an interior. Typically in the motorcycle industry, design teams are much smaller, so you're expected to do a lot more and get your hands on way more of the vehicle than in the automotive industry, where they have much larger design teams and you're more segmented in what you're doing. Where you might be, just exterior on one platform. I'm doing all of the platforms and all the parts and all the bikes that are coming out. So like I have a hand in all of that here, which is great, but it's also, you need to know what you're doing in order to be efficient in that scenario. So it's hard to give one avenue or another. I'd say I used much more of what I got out of school than I thought I was going to once I got here. So, as far as like extracurricular things and things that I thought would not relate, they do. It all does. It's all part of a bigger package, I think.
I tell students there's a method to the madness. There's a reason you're taking classes you don't think you need.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so I do see
matter for sure.
Right. I see a question that came in. I think that's Faith. Asks, what was your first job out of college and how did you find it?
So I graduated in 2008, which is not a good time to find jobs. So I sent my portfolio and cover letter out to 75 different places, something like that. I maybe heard back from 10 to 12 of them, and then toured some of them, interviewed, and eventually got offered a position that way. Not long after school. I mean, I graduated in, when month did you graduate? I got a job in September. So
yeah, we graduate like May or June. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a tough time to find a job, but I would say rely on the alumni network. Oh man. If you can find connections, CCS connections in the industry that you're looking for, that's a great way to get in. Everybody that I know that graduated loves helping out, students or anybody that's, from the school looking for a job. I think that's huge. Networking in general is huge.
Yeah.
Just firing off emails isn't enough usually. Everybody's doing that. That's easy. Go try to call somebody, try to meet up with them, grab coffee, even just people in your local network. Those connections will branch out across the US or across the world for sure.
Yeah, that's a huge resource that we have here is our awesome alumni. I always tell students, I was like, well, CCS has been in existence since 1906. So there's over 100 years of people out there who are artists and designers who came from CCS.
Yeah.
It's a big network.
It's crazy.
So I see another question came in. Is it common for the motorcycle industry to outsource physical model creation to visualize design, scale, and function?
Not typically. And that's mostly because the more stuff you put out in the world, the harder it is to keep confidentiality around it. So, like I had been doing contract design work for the motorcycle industry. That was almost never OEM. It was always aftermarket companies where confidentiality isn't as big of a risk, I guess. It's kind of rare for, I think it's leaning more towards companies are outsourcing some of that stuff now, even some of the design work, but I think most of the time they try to keep their cards close to their chest, do a lot of that stuff in-house. I know at Zero we have a whole prototyping facility and people that work in that facility full time. So there are people there welding up frames that for prototyping or 3D printing or painting. All that stuff is done here so that we can kind of keep it under wraps.
Yeah. And for students who aren't familiar with the term OEM, that's just original equipment manufacturer, right? So like the company that actually manufactures the object.
Yeah, right. That's your Zero, your Honda, your Suzuki, and then aftermarket is, well, I was going to say Brembo brakes or something like that, but like parts that you can buy for your vehicle that don't come from the actual manufacturer of the vehicle.
Yep. That's a great question. Industry specific, I would not know. All right, so I have some more questions for you. What would you say is one thing you learned or gained from CCS that's like really impacted and changed your life or your creative process?
Uh, I mean, that motorcycle design class really kind of directed me on a path I didn't think I was gonna take. So it's in that respect, faculty. Tom Roney is totally behind that. And he's
Hmm.
somebody that's very into motorcycles and has been for a long time. And it's just this wealth of knowledge in that respect. And
Hmm.
when something like that clicks in you, and then you also have that person there to be like, oh, you like this? Here's a ton of information on that. Just and you're able to absorb it all. That's huge.
Hmm.
I think that story is pretty typical for CCS alum. I mean, my buddy Pat Daly, who you had on here, I know
Hmm.
he has talked to me about his photography instructor at CCS more than one occasion. So I think, uh, yeah, faculty, people that are there to help you and steer you on the right path are huge.
Hmm. That is huge. And it's awesome because those people eventually become your peers because many of them are either vets from the industry or still in the industry. And so, I've had teachers that were teachers at CCS who I then turn around like working with them in the industry. I'm like, oh, hello, so it's
Yeah,
a
I mean, I
powerful.
remember talking to one of my professors at the time and being like, man, I'm having trouble, landing an internship because nobody's hiring right now. Nobody wants to take on extra people. And he went and was like, he's like, I have a few friends that are that are that own consultancies or something like that. And he ended up putting me in touch with a bunch of, potential leads. So like just having that person be like, hey, I recommend this student as
Hmm.
like again, part of that network is will get you ahead much quicker
Hmm.
than sending out 75 emails.
You can do it, but it's not the most
Just
efficient way.
spend your time networking, not emailing. Well,
Yeah,
emailing to network at least, but yeah.
that's awesome. I like that. I want that to be a quote somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, All right, last question from me. Knowing what you know now about your industry, about what you've absorbed at CCS, what you self-taught after CCS, and what you've been able to accomplish, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self about pursuing your creative path?
Oh man, that's deep. Uh, I kind of feel like I got pretty lucky. I feel like I got set on I wouldn't change much of my path. Like I think
Hmm.
there were parts of it that were really difficult.
Hmm.
Running your own business is not easy, and it's trying to create your own job by running your own business is not easy. You don't
Hmm.
get to do all the fun stuff 100% of the time. Um, but then again, it was a huge learning experience, and it offered
Hmm.
me the time and ability to soak up all these new skills that I then was able to direct towards landing a job in the motorcycle industry. So it
Hmm.
all matters, and it's all I think how you spin it. So try to extract as much learning and knowledge from everything, regardless of if you're not into where you're at the time or what.
Hmm. Be a sponge.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
connected.
Hmm. That's awesome. That's awesome insight. So I'm going to see if our audience has any more questions. I know one question just popped into my head that I actually forgot to ask earlier. I think is always a fun question. What would you say has been your favorite project to work on to date? That was my baby. That was my favorite.
Sorry, my favorite what? You got
Your favorite project that you've worked on to date? Do you have like a favorite bike that you've worked on or a favorite project in general that you've gotten to
the next one.
the next one? Oh, the
Yeah,
secret one.
always. No, just always. It's always the next one.
Ah.
Especially with building bikes. I mean, when I was every bike I built, I tried to learn a new skill so that I'd complete the bike and And then I've learned so much from that past project that I was like, all right, I would do all these things different, and I'm going to do them all different on this next project. And then I'd be super excited about the next one. So I was always trying to kind of push myself to learn new things with every project. So, yeah, but like to date, to look back at stuff, I mean, I don't know. Isn't that a creative professional thing where like you look back at your old work and you're like, that's all garbage. This new stuff's going to be the best, because you're evolving constantly, and all you see are all I see are the flaws in my previous work. So I just try to constantly correct and better what I'm doing. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe if I had to pick something, like going back, the very first bike I built, which now I look at and I like almost cringe with like I don't know, the learnings I had back then versus what I know now. But just going from that sketch to an actual product, and like having the whole process, I have photos of everything. I have like all this information and like this whole history and timeline for that project. And that was the first time that I had gone to that length and learned that much in such a short period of time. So that project was huge, and like definitely a springboard. I was like, oh, I can just go look and learn what I want to learn and then apply it. I don't, it was, I don't know, a huge stepping stone for me.
Yeah, that industrious spirit is like admirable to me. I'm like, I don't know if I have it in me to go. Like I have on my bucket list, like I want to build a house from scratch, but I'm like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get there.
You can figure all of it out on YouTube. Just YouTube, whatever you need. It's all out there. Some of it's terrible, but eventually you'll figure out why.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if I get there. But that's beautiful, that level of passion, commitment to learning, and then pushing yourself. And that's, I think, the first time I've heard someone say that, like what their favorite project is what they get to work on next. That's really exciting.
Yeah,
that means
that's always the most exciting. That's the way it was in school too. I mean, I was so stoked on the first like day or two where you're getting the brief and you're figuring out like the parameters or like the sponsor or whatever it is, and you're just I still feel that every day we start a project. It's great.
The magic. All right, I see we have one more question that came in. This is a really fun question. If you had to choose one part, which most represents the soul of the motorcycle, what would it be? So if you had to choose a part of a motorcycle that represents the soul of the motorcycle, what would it be? Ooh.
Oh man. Part isn't physical part. I don't think it is one part. It's the experience, right? It's you're essentially developing a tool that needs to do something. So develop it to do whatever it's supposed to do as best you can. If it's a dirt bike, make it an awesome dirt bike, and like that, the experience of riding it should be the soul of the bike, right? The way you feel on it, the way it makes you feel on it. Does it give you confidence, or is it scary? Does it, all of that stuff can be boiled down to specs and dimensions and colors and materials and finishes. It's all part of a bigger package, right? So at the end of the day, we're designing a product that is going to be purchased by somebody, and they're going to decide to purchase it based on that feeling. So that's the soul. It's, it's what somebody feels about it. It's not a badge or a tank or an engine. All that stuff is changing constantly. So
I felt very deep. I was like, this sounds spiritual. Just like a person. It's not your arm, it's not your head. It's something bigger than all of that.
Yeah, for sure. It's a sum of all the parts, right? It's never one thing. They all have to work together. They all have to commingle to create a good product, whether it's a bike or, something as simple as like a chef's knife, whatever. It's all in the way somebody interacts with it and the way it makes them feel.
I think that's what you just said is the perfect insight for a strong industrial designer or a product designer, vehicle designer, whomever. The designer thinks about, the impact that what they're designing, the impact it will have on the user of that object, right? So I think that's a perfect way to summarize like what industrial designers actually do, right?
Yeah, and it's important to remember that it's not for you, it's for the person you're designing it for. Whether you think whatever that product is looks cool to you. If that product sells to somebody that is not typically you demographically, you need to understand what they like and what they're interested in, and then relay that back into the product.
It's huge, huge insight. And the best artists think about who they're impacting with their art, who they're impacting with their design. And clearly you are impacting many people with not just the bikes that you're designing, but also with the way you're teaching others to design bikes. So I think it's awesome what you're doing in the world with your design knowledge and your growing knowledge as you continue to learn and work on these projects. And it's just been wonderful to learn about your journey and learn about a little bit more about motorcycles, because I was clueless.
Yeah. I know they're pretty far into people still. So.
You said what now?
So it's amazing how foreign they are to people still. You know, I've been so immersed in this world that I forget that some people don't know the difference between a motorcycle and a scooter or something like that. Like it's just
well, that one I think I do know. I think I do. I hope I know the difference. But it's beautiful to be immersed in a world so deeply too. So I just want to make sure to plug any place that people should go if they want to learn more about your work, about motorcycles. If they're inspired, where should people go? Should they follow you on Instagram? Should they go to a website? Where can we point people?
Yeah, I mean, so my Instagram's technically more of a personal account and like my custom motorcycle business. So that's obviously you have the link to that right below. But yeah, the company I work for is called Zero Motorcycles. It's just zeromotorcycles.com. They're all electric. They've been around since 2006. And yeah, I think we're the hands down biggest electric motorcycle manufacturer in the country right now, so in the world.
Awesome. So if you are interested in some more inspiration, definitely check out that company. Make sure to follow us and the alumni so that you can learn more about what's going on. And I know we talked a lot about industrial design today, but if you're also interested in transportation design, we do have a Majors Insight tonight where you can meet with our department chair and faculty and learn even more in depth about some of the things happening in the industrial design industry. So David, I want to thank you so much for your insight, for your journey, I'm inspired. I'm like, maybe I need to learn how to build that house. And for all the things that you shared with the folks tuning in today. And I want to thank everyone who has tuned in for watching another Alumni Live. And we will see you at the next one.
Killer. Bye. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Brandy. It's good talking to you.
It was great talking to you too. You have a beautiful day.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.